everyone. Welcome to Shut Up and Say Something. I am Deedre Daniel. This show is all about how to live a more interesting life, and we're learning how to do that one interesting conversation at a time. We stay away from topics like politics, religion, and the ad nauseum topic du jour, but pretty much anything else goes. And today I am speaking with Nevel. And here's the story about Anne. Anne was a total stranger, and she called me up in 2019 because she had read an article about me in the American Society of Association Executives magazine. And I had spoken at some of their conferences in the past, and she was interested in hiring me for an event at her association called the Healthcare Distribution Alliance. And at the time, she was a senior director in the education division. Now she is vice president, clearly because she's so good at identifying excellent speaker talent. So anyway, she started talking to me for a couple of minutes, and then she said, "I'm having a sleepover. Would you like to come?" And I said, "Yes, I would." And she giggled and said, "Oh, yes, I thought you would say yes, but I also thought you might want a little bit more information first. Do you want to know who's coming?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, but I've already agreed to come." So she starts rattling off the names of the people that are coming. And I thought, maybe I should have asked before. Like, I didn't know anyone who was coming, but I realized at this point I can't back out. Like, it was so weird and different that I had to say yes. And if you want to have a more interesting or fascinating life, you need to attract more people to you. And that's what we're going to talk about today: making friends. And why is it seemingly so hard to make new friends in adulthood? What are the hurdles? How do we overcome those? And that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk to Anne and figure out, first of all, how did you even come up with the sleepover?
Thanks, Deidre. You described it perfectly. I remember it exactly as you just described. I kept thinking as I got older that I don't know, there was this nagging feeling that I wanted to have a sleepover just like I did as a kid. And every time I would mention it to somebody, not every time, but I mentioned it to the right people, I guess, enough times that I kept saying, as an adult, I just want to have a sleepover. Like, why can't we do that? Nobody does that anymore. Like all the things that go along with when you're a kid and you have a sleepover. I wanted to recreate that. And so I guess I said it to the right person that thought, yes, that's a great idea. Unfortunately, or fortunately for her, I'm not sure which it is at this point, she was the first person that said yes. And so I was like, awesome, let's go and do it. And let's and I have a background, as you said, in like doing events and speakers and those sorts of things. So we said, hey, I can do this. I can put together an event and I can bring some people together to have a sleepover, and maybe we'll make it even like some sort of way that the reason for those people to connect and learn from each other. So that's kind of how it came about.
Were you afraid of rejection? Were there certain people like you wanted to ask, but you didn't?
Yeah, so it's interesting because there was there was one person, and I'm not going to name any names because obviously about the well. I don't know if I should name names, but there was one person that had won a lot of awards.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, I heard her on a podcast actually,
Oh,
and for some reason I was drawn to her, but at the same time I was very intimidated. I don't know why. Like, I don't do that very often. Usually I'm okay with talking to people, but my first thought was, I really want to reach out to her. She seems like somebody, and I don't know, maybe we'll get into that a little bit more about how I make that determination. But for some reason I was like, she seems like somebody I'd like to have at a sleepover just by hearing her on a podcast. Um, but I was a little intimidated about reaching out to her. So I would say that's the one person. And maybe it was because she'd won some awards. And that
are we talking
intimidated me.
about Val?
We are talking about Val.
Well, her awards are pretty intimidating. So
Right?
I had her on a previous podcast, and she's won 10 Emmys. 10.
Right.
That's a big deal. And so you didn't know Val at all, and you heard her on a podcast and you invited her to the
Correct.
sleepover. See, I didn't know that.
Yes.
I thought you knew her in some other way. Oh,
Nope.
look at you.
No.
All
No.
right. No one else scared you so much that you just didn't ask?
I don't. Oh, probably people I didn't ask, but I asked total strangers. I asked somebody I was reading her book. I was reading her book, so the author, the author of a book that
Uh-huh.
I had never met her before, and I said, "Hey, what the heck?" I send her a message, and she didn't act like it was crazy. She just said she didn't really have the time, and
Uh-huh.
thought it sounded like a fun thing, and she might have just been saying that, but she was like, "Sounds like a good idea," but I just can't. I'm committed to doing some other things at that time or whatever. But yeah, she was kind of a big deal, I thought, anyway.
What criteria did you use to select the first group of women that you invited to this sleepover?
I started out with I want it to be women in kind of the same age group ish.
I see.
And I figured if I'm feeling this way, then maybe other people my age are feeling the same way. So I think that's kind of how I started with that. And I thought maybe they'll have some common things going on in their lives that they can, that they'll be able to relate to. And two things. One, somebody I thought would say yes. So obviously, I thought, like as you said, I had a feeling you might say yes. I don't know how. And I don't know how I came up with that, but in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm going to ask people that I think will more likely say yes. So that was very simple criteria
So you
because I
read
didn't
an
know what I
article
was
about
doing.
me and you said that's someone who will come to my sleepover.
No, no, no. It wasn't until we started talking. When
Oh,
we,
okay. All right.
when, once we were
Julie,
talking for a little while.
I got you. So you said, all right, I want to hire you to speak at my event. Hey, you seem cool. Do you want to come to a sleepover? That's the
Yeah,
way. Okay. All
pretty
right.
much, pretty much. And oh, wait, wait. So the other criteria was I thought that at least somebody else at the sleepover, somebody else will learn something from them, or they'll have some reason that I think they should be connected. So it didn't
Hmm.
have to be that everybody had to connect with each other, but I did want to, in the back of my mind, they had to have some sort of something that I thought would be of value, not, and not in a weird way, but, just some reason that they might want to connect with somebody else.
Right. And typically that's something to do with their profession.
Typically, yes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
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 Because there
Yeah.
definitely was a professional component to this. I mean, all of these women were entrepreneurs, every single one of
That
them that I
only
could think of, right?
That only happened, yeah, but that only happened accidentally. So that's why I was saying like initially it was
Uh-huh.
much simpler. Like my initial criteria was much simpler. Then I went to like entrepreneur because it just naturally seemed to happen that way. Like I wasn't
Mhm.
doing that on purpose initially. And then I was like, oh, well, it seems like everybody's either an entrepreneur or has an entrepreneurial mindset or
Uh-huh.
wants to thinking about being an entrepreneur. So then that just kind of happened after the first one.
Okay. You mentioned a few minutes ago, you said I was looking for women that I hoped would feel like I was feeling. Were you feeling a little disconnect and you wanted to connect with more people? Because you mentioned, wouldn't it be great to have a sleepover like we did in the past? Like, there was a little bit of a longing for connection there.
A combination of things. One, that just play, that sense of play that I
Yeah.
was feeling like for some reason I feel like I'm missing I'm missing something. Like I'm like, why didn't this transcend into our adult life? Like, why are we not still doing this? So there was a part that piece. And then the other piece was I didn't have regular girl trips planned in my calendar. I didn't have like a group of girls that I was like, and I know some people that do that. So I think
Yeah.
that, that kind of thing, I think I was also feeling like I'm missing, like I don't have that going on. So I kind of wanted to curate that in a
Yeah.
way.
I was telling my friend Evan about you and the sleepover, and he said, "Ugh, I just wish I could go up to a guy that seems kind of cool and say, 'Hey, do you want to play catch?'" And then the guy says, "Yeah." And then you just throw the ball around and exchange stories and that kind of thing. And then you hop on your bike and you pick up a couple of other friends and you ride over to the pub and you gather around the table, have a few beers, exchange a few more stories, and what a great day that would be. It's like, why can't we
Yeah.
do that? But why can't
Yeah.
we?
Based on what I just described, sounds like a very similar mindset.
Yeah. I mean, he's like,
Yeah.
and he didn't want to have a sleepover. He just wanted to go play catch. And
Right.
certainly a shorter amount of time. And
Right.
yeah. What were you hoping would happen that weekend? And did it meet your expectations?
I was hoping that, that it's that connection piece. That's something that's always kind of stood out to me about myself. Like if somebody asked me like what I think I do, yeah, I don't know. I can't think of like something that I do in all of my jobs or think something that I've done all along in my life. I always feel like I connect things and people and I get satisfaction out of that. Like I love if you were to tell me like, hey, I'm looking for, sometimes it's as simple as I'm looking for the best, chiropractor around. I don't know why I feel inclined to go find that person for you. Having a conversation with someone, and as I'm talking to them, I start thinking automatically, which is probably what I did with all, what I've done with inviting
Mhm.
people is when I'm talking to them, I'll hear them say something that makes me think, oh my gosh, they need to know so and so. And then whenever I see those connections happen and then they like each other or they work together or they hired that chiropractor or that hairdresser or whatever, I get some sort of feeling like I enjoy it. Like it makes my heart happy. Like it just
Yeah, you're a
so
matchmaker.
I loved that. So I will say, as far as or did I get what I wanted out of it?
Yeah,
I did. There was one morning when everybody was still in their PJs and at least not everyone, but a large group of people were around the kitchen table and they were sharing ideas and helping one another, with their jobs because like you said there was a professional component to it but they all had something in common that they could help each other with and then there
yeah.
were another couple of people that were sitting in another room, again, still in their PJs. They've got their laptops out and they're helping each other. And that was what I was looking for. Not everything was perfect. And since you were there, not everything was perfect. Um, but that is the piece that I took away. Oh my God, we went out on the beach in our PJs and took silly photos. Another
Uh-huh.
part of it that I really loved. That was what I was hoping to get out of it.
Some people are flaky these days, and a lot of people back out on plans. Did you have that happen?
Interestingly, with the first one, no, not a
Mm.
single one. And I think it was that, like I said before, I went in with like, okay, I'm going to ask people that I think will actually say yes. And I do think there was this kind of I don't know, maybe, I mean, I'm really intimidating. So I was probably like, you said yes, you got to be there. But I do think there was kind of a sense of, yeah, I said yes to this, like you said, this crazy thing. And I'm committed now and I'm going to be there.
Yeah, I just feel like a lot of people are flakier these days than they were in the past. I mean, maybe that's just my feeling. It just seems like a lot of people are willing to commit, and that's, a big undertaking on your part, and you're fronting the money for the mansion on the beach or out the cabin out in the woods kind of thing, and so, there's some risk associated with that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I think that's something I've learned about myself. Because you're absolutely right. There's a lot of flaky people out there. And something I've learned about myself is how important that is to me. Like, I know, I've chosen, like, when I've gone through these values exercises, reliability to me
Mhm.
is like number one. And the reason why is for things like that. Like, it's super important to me for people to follow through and do what they say they're going to do. And
Yeah.
so I've acknowledged, like I've made friends, and there's times where I've had said, okay, I can't be friends with that person because that is a super that's a super important value to me. So
Mhm.
maybe sometimes it's subconscious that I've asked people that I think are going to hopefully meet that criteria. They're going to be that person that
Mhm.
doesn't flake out on me and does follow through and do what they said they're going to do.
So you didn't know me at all, and I agreed instantly to come to this. Did it alarm you or excite you that I instantly understood what you were trying to do?
When I first decided I wanted to do this, like, I would kinda test it with people, and
Uh-huh.
I would tell them what I was doing, and I would tell them it's called the sleepover, and some people automatically were like, "Yes, this is awesome, I get it," and
Mhm.
then I had some friends, like, some really good friends that I'd been friends with for a while that were like, "Hmm, have you thought about changing the name of it?" And I'm like,
Mhm.
"Oh, you're you're
You're
not
out.
invited to my sleepover." Yeah, exactly.
You have
Clearly, you don't get
failed.
it.
Right. You have failed
Right.
the test. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And so then you were just rolling the dice on whether or not everyone was conscientious enough to pay you what they were supposed to pay and reliable enough to show up.
Yeah. Yeah. Just
Do you
kinda
think
rolling the dice.
do you think more people are reliable and good than we give everyone credit for? What do you think?
Mm. Hmm. I don't necessarily think, I mean, maybe, maybe. But we have to have, I'm reading this book, Talking to Strangers.
Uh-huh.
And in the book, it actually says that like we have to have some sort of like if we did totally believe that everybody is good or everybody is bad, like society wouldn't work out. I said something to somebody a little while ago, and I'm like, I just have to get shit done. Doesn't everybody? And I was like, doesn't everybody? And the other person was like, no, Anne, they don't. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like,
Mhm.
like isn't that just what you do? You just in same kind of thing. Like if I say I'm going to do something, doesn't everybody mean that? But no,
Yeah,
they
if
don't.
if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And that's just the way
Hmm.
it is. I'm going to get it done. But that's the way I was brought up. My parents are like that, and I
Oh, right.
surround myself with other people that follow through on what they say they're going to do. So that's conscientiousness. But I think there could be some people that do what they say they're going to do, but they're also evil too. I mean, I could have been a serial killer, boiled a rabbit, or did other inappropriate things. Like I paid you and I showed up, but I could have just been a total, wild woman. And you didn't consider me to be a risk at all. I really,
Yeah.
after meeting you, Anne, you were very pragmatic and reliable, dependable, sensible. And what you did wasn't that sensible at all. And I mean, it just wasn't. You're
I
inviting a
know.
bunch
I
of
know.
strangers to come stay at a mansion. At least it's
Yep.
not your house, but you're inviting them to this house,
Yeah.
like a bunch of random people on a beach for 2 nights.
Yeah.
Anything could happen. And I
Yeah.
mean, you're rolling the dice there on quite a
Yeah.
bit. And you weren't concerned at all. You weren't worried at all.
No, and there's something, because as you were going through that list, I'm like, yeah, yep, yep, I'm pretty
Uh-huh.
logical. I'm like a
Yeah.
logical person. I don't consider myself a very woo-woo person, and I'm like, oh, that's that little piece of woo in me is that is that as long as I can remember, I've always been that way, and at the same time, I mean, as a kid, I saw some bad stuff. Like I know there's bad
Mhm.
people. I'm not, again, back to that logical piece. I know there's a
Uh-huh.
lot of bad stuff that can happen, and
Well,
somehow I can make.
and didn't you major in criminology too?
I
Right?
was, and I
And I
worked
don't
in
know if I make
corrections.
right, you worked in corrections. So did you just think you could take me down if I just showed up with a knife or something?
I don't know. I think a lot of people think they're a good judge of character, but
Uh-huh.
I didn't even meet you, so I don't know how I'm a
No.
good judge of character or
I
somebody.
mean, it was
Like
a
I get a
10-minute
pretty,
phone call. It was a
I get a good
10-minute phone
impression.
call. You see an article about me, you call me up, we have a 10-minute phone call, and you're like, "Hey, come spend the night for 2 nights at this beach." I'm like, "Okay, let's go." I
You
don't
didn't
know,
have the
maybe
signs. You didn't have the signs of yeah. I'm like I
Uh-huh.
could see someone coming into the prison, and I'm like, oh, now that one you got to look out for.
Yeah, that's a shady
But
character. But I
mm-hmm.
I don't think I was the perfect, guest. So I'm gonna share the French 75 story. If are you okay with that? Can I bring
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. I landed in the Norfolk airport and met three other women that Anne had invited to the sleepover. All their airplanes were landing at roughly the same time. So we all met at baggage, piled into the car, and said, let's stop off at the liquor store on the way to this mansion on the beach. And I had tried a cocktail called the French 75, and I had just tried it a few weeks prior at one of these little boutique, hoity-toity little bars in Washington, D.C. And I got the recipe. I thought, I'm going to remake this. And it involves gin, Saint Germain, fresh squeezed lemon juice, a little bit of simple syrup, and you shake it up on ice and then top it off with a little bit of Prosecco. And it goes down like Kool-Aid. It doesn't taste like alcohol at all, really. But I thought this could replace a mimosa, if we're going to have brunch or something like that. That first Saturday morning, I make these French 75s. Now, when I had it at that hoity toity little bar, they put it in these antique little coupe glasses where people had sensible servings, during that time. Where the hamburger was really small and a scoop of ice cream was really small. Yeah, this little glass had maybe 3 sips in it. But the barware at this mansion on the beach was your typical American size, big glasses. So I poured these drinks for some of the ladies that said, yeah, sure, we'll have a cocktail. This is like a mimosa, right? So they drink them, and within 20 minutes, it hit pretty hard. And one woman started crying. Another woman confessed to a deep, dark secret. And then the third decided at that moment she was going to divorce her husband. And she did. Like the following Monday, she left her husband. And I hope he never listens to this podcast because he'll blame it on the French 75s. I mean, obviously, there's other things going on, and she's much happier now. But I mean, that's all within 20 minutes. So, did you, at that moment in time, did you regret inviting me? I've
Oh, that's
never
a good
point blank
question.
asked you that. It's like, is she the life of the party or did she just kill it? Like what what just happened?
No, I never thought that. I did not think that at all. I didn't like blame it on you, but I was like, oh, note to self, don't do this again. Because that educational portion of it just kind of, I mean, we like
We weren't
made
like,
several attempts at like
well, we learned a lot. It just wasn't anything business related at that point in time. Like I know the agenda went out the window right
the
away. We got like,
agenda.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and at the same time, I have thought about those things that came out of it. Like for you, like you said, she's much happier now.
Mm-hmm.
And I've used that because of course everything that happens at the sleepover stays at the sleepover.
Uh-huh.
At the same time, without naming any names or giving too much information, I've used that as kind of a selling point. Like we bonded.
That's, I don't know. Is that,
I
or it's very cathartic to cry and, tell these total strangers things that you've been thinking about for so long. And,
right.
and I'm friends with
Right.
all three of them, the other ladies there as well, for
Yeah.
sure. You just don't let me
Right.
bartend anymore.
Yeah. No
Yeah.
bartending. Yeah, watch what happens. It's hard though. I will say that part of it, you don't know. Yeah, you don't know who. Like
Uh-huh.
like you said, you could have come there and just like gotten totally wasted. You could have done anything, I
I could
guess,
have.
and I wouldn't
Yeah.
have known. But
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm trying to, crash marriages. But the second part of how you described that like, yeah, she was able to feel comfortable enough to get apparently really good advice from a bunch
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
strangers
But
about
and
her
even for the other
life.
two, I think it was very cathartic
Right,
for them to get some things off their
right.
chest that they had been thinking about for a while. So there was definitely some truth serum in the French 75 cocktail that I didn't
Yes.
know I was mixing up at that moment in time. So why did you invite me back the next year?
I invited you, well, because like you weren't all those awful things. We got there, the sleeping arrangements weren't quite as I thought they were gonna be. So those were some lessons learned from from that first time. But you took it in stride. You're like, all right, I don't know you, and you've given me the crappiest sleeping arrangement here in the house. But
Well, I
but
mean,
I'm not gonna get
A
upset about it.
yeah. So I arrived and Anne had this mansion on the beach. It was a huge home, but the room that I was assigned to was sort of outside and around the corner, and it was in sort of this dark room that smelled like spiders have a party there. It's like this is filled with spiders. I don't see them now, but I know they're going to come out at night, and I didn't want to sleep in that room. And then she said, well, you can sleep like maybe in a you said,
Air
oh, we
mattress.
have
I think
this
that's
air mattress and you can sleep, in the middle of the living room. And I thought, I don't know these people. And I'm one of those folks that needs to have like a door that I can lock so that I can go to sleep. And I just don't want to be out in the middle of this room in this home. It just seems like the beginning of some sort of, murder mystery or whatever. I'm like, so yeah. So then I wound up sleeping up at like the top of the turret. And what do you
like
even
the
call that?
eagle's nest. It's like the eagle's nest thing of a house, and yeah, it was like a little, like a not even a sofa. What do you call it? Like almost like a futon, but not like it doesn't really
Oh, a
fold out into a bed
futon.
and
Yeah.
then
So
make into a bed. But it was like that quality, though. I think.
Yeah, Jim Gaffigan says that a futon is filled with hate. And those love seat cushions from 1982 were stuffed with deep regret. That was fine. I was happy to be there. I was.
Yeah.
It was a good
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, that's what, and I think I invited you back because, yeah, you didn't complain about it. You seemed to have a good time. You were, yeah, I mean, you were doing those things. You were participating in all of the things in the way that I had hoped and helping others. You shared with us too, like the very first night. I remember it so well because you're like, yeah, very nonchalantly, I started this nonprofit. I don't know. It was really cool. I felt like we were a part of your journey and
oh, you were
yeah,
and still are.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it felt good.
All right. So if someone else wants to host a sleepover, you've learned quite a bit you've done 3 sleepovers now, right?
Yes.
What would you recommend someone do? They want to create their own sleepover. What did you learn? Pros, cons, what do you recommend?
I'd say first of all, like have some sort of criteria, like I was saying. I mean, even if it's a little bit weird or whatever. One of the things that I let kind of go out the window was the age thing that I said. I was right. I should have gone with my gut. It made sense. There was one person that was outside of that space and great, lovely person at the same time wasn't experiencing all the same things that everybody else was. And I saw you almost choke on your water. Um, yeah. So anyway, there was one person that was there that was a little just in a different place in her life, and so it made sense. My initial gut feeling that I should invite people that are in a similar place in their lives was right. And so I think if you have that feeling that you want to invite people for whatever reason it is, go with it and stick with that. I do think it's important to think about like not everybody's going to connect, not everybody's going to like everybody there, but to have an idea that they will connect in some way, or to hope, have some reason that they're going to have some commonalities. Like, she has a podcast and she has a podcast, and maybe they can talk about those things together, whatever it might be. The house, big lesson, thanks to you. Be very particular about checking out the house and where you're going to stay. Make sure, I also, another big lesson that, sleepover to me in my brain was truly sleepover. Like in my head initially, it's like, oh, sleeping bags and, bunk beds and sharing rooms and all of that. We're at this point in our life, that's not a reality. We don't want to be doing that. Nobody really wants. I mean, even if you think for a brief second, oh, that sounds fun, it's not the reality. Everybody wants their space. So I learned that from it. Yeah, I would say that those are probably the biggest things. Go with your gut, do what you want to do. Like I said before, if it doesn't resonate with somebody, they're not your people. They don't
Right.
want to be there. You don't want
Yeah.
them there. And if I mean, there's so many lessons learned that I could talk for a lot longer about that, but I would say that those are probably the two biggest things that people want their, you know,
Mhm.
it's supposed to be childlike and fun and play. We're also adults and we do still do
Yeah,
still really appreciate our space.
need their personal space. I would recommend visiting the home instead of just relying on the photos
Oh, totally.
so you can
Yeah,
see what kind of space you have.
I think that, and yeah, I know. I don't know how I ended up. I think there was no way that the space was not going to be what it was for the second place, just because I guess they had enough videos and enough
Yeah.
testimonials and people who went back on a regular basis. That's a good sign.
I didn't
Um,
realize you didn't check out the second place.
Not in person.
No, I didn't know that. No, you did
Yeah.
that's a fantastic house. That is created for events like that. I think,
Right.
whoever
Right.
the architect definitely knew that this was for a lot of people getting together who also need their own personal space.
Yep.
So, it's a perfect house for that. So, are you still trying to connect with more people or do you have enough friends now?
All the time. All the time. I don't know, maybe I have a problem. No,
You're
I
a
don't think
friend
I
addict?
do. Kind of related to what we were saying before. Like I constantly connect with people, but they don't all stick either, right?
Yeah.
I'm always trying to connect with people and I reach out to strangers all the time.
Mhm. Most people won't do that. So why do you think in their minds they have put up all of these hurdles to reaching out to a total stranger and saying, "Do you want to play catch? Do you want to be friends? I like the flowers in your front yard. Why don't you let's be friends?" Like, I like your
You
bike.
know,
I like your
it's
shoes. Let's be friends.
it's really hard because like I am someone, I saw the FSU flag in my neighbor's yard down the street, and
Uh-huh.
I use my stalker tendencies to like figure out who she is and send her a message, and I'm like, hey, we went to the same college, we should be friends. I don't
Wow.
I don't know you.
Hold on. How did you get her email address?
I don't remember. That's what I'm wondering, how actually I really made that all work, because I've never actually talked to her, and that's the sad
Uh-huh.
thing. I can't tell you how long ago that was, and I've never talked to her in person.
Uh-huh.
Because probably she still thinks I'm a weirdo. I mean, she seemed like, we connected on the social channels and stuff. So we're connected, I think, on Facebook and LinkedIn.
Uh-huh.
I eventually determined that we're not meant to be friends because she lives a totally different life than I do.
Uh-huh.
And so it probably just wasn't ever supposed to work. But the reality is she probably all along thought I was a total weirdo, which that's the risk. Like what
Yeah.
you were just saying, like, yeah, I mean, back to that sensible, logical person, the sensible, logical person wouldn't just go and assume that everybody's going to be okay and they're not going to
Mhm.
think you're a weirdo.
But maybe at
As
this
a,
point you've done enough, kind of like sales. You know you're going to get rejected, but you're okay with it because you know that right around the corner there's going to be someone who says yes.
Mhm.
Because you've had enough people say yes that you have kept in your inner circle as you go out
Right.
and continue to connect. Because I would imagine as you're
Yeah.
connecting with other people, you're getting rid of some others because you can't be
Yeah.
friends with you can't be friends with thousands of people. Like your brain wouldn't
No.
accommodate
And,
that.
and I'm not good friends with a lot of people. Like that's the thing too. It's like my circle of good friends and people I would consider a good friend is pretty darn small. And it
Mhm.
takes a lot for me to like think that. And at the same time, I mean, to your point, like I'm also of the mindset, like I've always been, no matter what your title is, what you do for, even though I did say the 10 Emmys kind of like intimidated me, but at the same time, I still reached out and I still
Mhm.
acknowledged that people are people. Like I've always
Right.
been that person. Sometimes it bites me in the butt in the professional world, but no matter who it is or what they're doing, they're all people, and we've all
Mhm.
got struggles, and we've all, and so I know like there might be that person that's going to be like, why do you think you can talk to me?
Right.
Um, but like you said, there've been enough people that haven't been, that it's shown me that
Just keep at it.
everybody,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And some of it too depends on your upbringing. I mean, I grew up a Navy brat and I moved every 2 or 3 years my entire life. And I was always on a quest to find new friends. Like, who was I going to sit with on the school bus? Who was I going to sit with in the cafeteria? And we would move, and my mom would point out kids. Hey, I think she lives in that house over there. Why don't you go knock on the door? And I'd go knock on the door as a little kid by myself, go knock on the door, total strangers, and say, to the adult in charge, do you have any kids my age that I could spend time with? And sometimes they did, and sometimes they didn't. And then I would keep talking
that's
to
so
them,
cool.
and then I'd shrug my shoulders and go off to the next house. And that was my that was my normal childhood. And I know a lot of
Yeah,
other kids don't have that childhood, but can we
yeah,
do that as adults, knowing that certainly people are going to think we're crazy, but there will be other people
yeah.
that get it.
Isn't that interesting though? Because we grew up in a different time too.
Hmm.
And I mean, I know that you're at least within the range. You're a little bit younger than I am, but we're still grew up in a very different time where you could go up and that was a normal thing. Like I mean, I think that's part of maybe why I'm the way I am. A couple of reasons, like we didn't move a lot, but we were poor, and I was always trying to find friends that weren't mean girls, or just find people, or just people that might have something in common with me. And I was very adventurous.
Hmm.
I would go and I didn't have a care in the world. I would just get on my bike and kind of to your point, like get on my bike and ride and go and do the things. Kids don't do that anymore. Like they
Yeah.
have dates and they have these things that are arranged. So maybe it's gonna be even harder potentially.
I
I
don't
don't
know. We
know.
got to take those risks. In 2005, I got a divorce and I realized I don't have any friends. And to be clear, I had friends, but they were our friends. They were people
Right.
I had met through my husband. And when I moved to Lakeland, I didn't know anybody and social media didn't exist. And I had lost touch with all my friends from college and all that. And so when he and I got a divorce, I realized, oh, he's going to get the friends in the divorce. And even for the ones he didn't, I wanted new friends. I wanted new friends to go with my new life. I didn't want just to, have friends at work. And so I was on this quest again suddenly to find new friends. And I moved into this old apartment building. It was actually an old building that they turned into new apartments called the Lake Mirror Tower. And it had this huge foyer and grand area that looked kind of spooky. And I thought this would be a great place to have a Halloween party. And I'm going to have a Halloween party and I'm going to invite anybody and everyone I talk to this party. So I went to the apartment manager and I was like, I want to reserve this grand area for a Halloween party. And she says, well, it's already reserved. And I'm all deflated. I'm like, who's reserving the room? She goes, well, it's Carrie. I said, who's Carrie? She goes, Carrie with the corgi. I said, who's, I don't know who that is. They're like, Carrie with the corgi on the fourth floor. I'm like, I do not know Carrie with the corgi on the fourth floor. And I said, can I have her apartment number? I'm going to go knock on her door. And they said, no, we can't do that. It's a violation of privacy. So for the next week, I'm staring down anyone with a dog and, trying to figure out, is that a corgi and all that. And I
Yeah.
was on the seventh floor and I look out the window and I see this woman with bright platinum blonde hair walking a corgi. And I threw open the window and I start yelling, Carrie, Carrie. And she's looking around and finally she looks up and I yell, are you Carrie with the corgi from the fourth floor? And long pause. And she says, yeah. I'm like, well, don't go anywhere. I'm coming down. And I start to leave and I think, oh my God, she's going to disappear on me. And so I ran back to the window. I'm like, I'm serious. Don't go anywhere. Stay right there. And she says, okay. And so I run down the hallway, get on the elevator, go around the building, run out down to the lake where she is. And I'm panting. And I was like, hi, I'm Deedre. And I understand you're having a Halloween party and I want to have a Halloween party too. So we should have it together. And she just stares at me and she says, okay, well, I need to go inside now. I was like, well, where are you going? She goes, well, I'm going back to my apartment. I have friends there. And, in sales, you don't let them go. Right. And so I was like, well, I'm going to go with you. And she goes, you're, okay. And so I get on the elevator and I'm talking to her. I have all these ideas about how we can decorate the foyer and all that kind of stuff. And so I follow her back to her apartment and she opens the door and she's still kind of looking at me weird. And I follow her inside and she has these people sitting around her coffee table and all that. And she goes, hi, everyone. And she's already forgotten my name. And I'm like, hi, I'm Deedre. You're having a Halloween party. You all coming? Because I want to have the party too. And I'll make jello shots and all this kind of stuff. And she's just sort of nodding at me like, okay, all right. I was like, well, now I know where your apartment is. Can I have your number? And she goes, okay. And so she gives me her phone number. I was like, all right, I'll see you all later. And 8 years later, Carrie was my maid of honor. And she's just absolutely wonderful. I love her to death. And, sometimes you got to do that. Like, we're going to be friends. That's just the way it is. You don't know it yet, but we're going to be friends. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
She's
great
great.
story. I love that. Yeah.
I mean, have you done anything else that would be considered seemingly odd as far as trying to make new friends?
I like to say that it's my investigative skills, but it's really stalker skills. Um, and I pretty much can figure out anything. Like I'd like to believe too, it's also about like, knowing my surroundings and being aware of,
Uh-huh.
who's around me in my neighborhood. But I just really have this need, I have this need to know. And sometimes it is like there was a point where I think my husband and I had gotten to where, oh, all of our friends either have kids or they're doing all these things. We
Mhm.
don't seem to have anybody to hang out with. I'm like, let me check out the property records, the property records of all the people in our neighborhood. And I'm like, hey, this guy was in the military too. And his wife seems okay. She's a school, like I know their whole story. And I'm like, we should probably be friends with them.
And then you meet them and you have to act like you've never heard
Yeah,
this
like you
information
never.
before. You just let them
Yes.
unfold.
Yes. Yes. I
Wow.
mean, I am
Yeah,
I probably shouldn't tell people these things out loud, but it really is for, I mean, it's for, general situational awareness to know like what you're dealing with.
sure.
Those
Yeah.
poor people that are listing their houses that I'm looking at right now. No idea.
Do I want to buy their house or be their best friend? Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow. There are several apps that people use to meet people. Have you used the Nextdoor app at all? Have you tried
So
that?
it's interesting because my husband is pretty introverted.
Mhm.
And, he likes to say that he doesn't even really like people, but he is that person that, like, when we are with people, they're like, oh my gosh, he's so much fun and he's great, but when he's not, that's not like he really doesn't want to be around people necessarily. He is the one who was insistent upon setting up his next door account. I do not have one and I haven't
Really?
done that. And I have no interest in it. So it's funny that you mentioned that because I'm just like, isn't that weird that you're the one that's interested in having that next door thing? And
Well, the
hey,
Nextdoor app is a lot of people saying, "Who's this weirdo in my, Ring doorbell recording?" Right? You do get a lot
yeah.
of the people that do that, like this person stole my package, kind of thing. But then there's others that'll say, "We're having a meetup. We're all going to go to this local pub and play poker,
Yeah.
whatever. Who would like to come to that?" And I've met some people through that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I prefer to do it the other way where I stalk them and then I pretend like I don't know these things about them and just conveniently run into them.
Or you could do what I do and just,
Sneak attack,
attack
the
you in the
sneak
park
attack.
and right, or attack you in the park and follow you up to your apartment. I'm hanging out with you. We're friends now.
Exactly.
That's the way it
Exactly.
works.
Now that I'm thinking about it, you should be wondering why now. Maybe there was more to it whenever I called you, but there really wasn't. Um, there really wasn't. I
I
didn't
don't
know
know,
anything.
Anne.
I did look at your website, but I think that's as
Uh-huh.
far as it went. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm
I think
really
that was
glad
it.
that you, stalked Val. I love her to death. She's
Isn't
fantastic.
she great?
Yeah,
And to that point, right? She's got problems just like the rest, like we've all got.
yeah, she's totally a normal person.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Totally normal.
yeah, and,
Yeah.
you introduced me to Terry Carden, and it was
Mhm.
Terry who was the first person to pay me to do my online game show, and that's how I wound up surviving COVID. I mean, she gave me the confidence to start charging people, and then the rates continue to climb, and I mean, that's how we survived is and now I still
Awesome.
do those. So people are out and about socializing in person, but I'm still doing these online game shows. I mean, it became a product. So that's a direct result of you introducing me to Terry.
That's awesome. And that's what I
Yeah.
love about it. That's what I was saying. I love it. I love to see, just those connections going on and what can come of it. It's so cool.
I think back to trying to make friends as an adult, and sometimes it's the hangups that we have. Thinking about this bit that Jerry Seinfeld had where he said, "You seem like a nice person, but I'm just not taking applications right now." Are you familiar with
Yes.
that
Yeah, yeah,
at
yeah,
all?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, "Hey, you seem
Totally.
really nice. I'm just not taking applications right now." In 2007, I moved to Washington, DC from Florida, and I didn't know anybody at all. I moved up there by myself. It was a couple years after my divorce. So once again, I'm making new friends. And at this point in time, Facebook had come out, and I tracked down a woman by the name of Julie she and I went to high school together, and I find out that she was living in Washington, DC. So I thought, hey, let's hang out. This is somebody I could, go to happy hour with or whatever. And I start sending her messages, and she blows me off. I mean, she is not interested at all, and I'm not giving up. So, every other week I would say, "Hey, are you in town? I'm back. Let's meet up." And she just kept turning me down. I would say after like 5 or 6 times, she finally gives in because she realizes I'm not going away. And we meet up at Galaxy Bar. Are you familiar with that? Like out
Yeah,
in Clarendon? Yeah.
yeah,
So we
yeah.
meet up there, have a couple beers, and she says, "Okay, I have a confession." I was like, "What is that?" She goes, "I really just didn't have room for you." I mean, that was totally Jerry Seinfeld. And she wasn't trying to be funny and she wasn't trying to be snobby, but she said, I have enough friends. I
Huh.
really do. And that's why I continued to turn you down, but I realized you weren't going away and I had to meet up with you. And you know what? I have room for you. I do. I have room for you. And I thought, oh, well, Your Highness, I'm so, honored that I've made the cut. Right. And then she introduced me to all of her friends. And sure enough, I mean, she has a big old group of friends that are devoted to her. They go with her everywhere she goes. And so suddenly they became my friends too. And so that just opened up my world. And for anyone listening who experiences rejection, I'm going to say, keep at it. I'm not saying stalk them, although and stalking people and it's working out quite
It,
well. I guess you could do this in a non-creepy way, but if you're committed and you say, I want friends, I'm going to make this work, it can happen. What do you
yeah.
think?
So another thing I thought about too that like and so this is a little maybe a little bit off topic, but I was just thinking about my, my stock, the way that I go about making friends.
Uh-huh.
Maybe it's also kind of like so I have kind of mixed feelings like when somebody says, "Do you like surprises?" I'm like, actually, no, I don't like surprises. And it's the same, I feel like it's the same concept as when I was a kid, I used to unwrap all my Christmas gifts and then wrap them back up and put them back under the tree
I
because
think
I
that's just
needed
being curious. That's being
I
a
needed to
kid.
know what was in there, but I also really don't like surprises. Like I don't like
Well, hold on, Ann. Hold
I
on. Now, when you opened the present, did you act surprised? Did you go,
oh,
oh,
totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Barbie,
Oh,
Lego? So you
totally.
put
Yeah,
on a
yeah,
big
yeah, yeah.
act.
Yeah, you have to put
Okay.
on a big act.
Okay.
And so I feel like and I hadn't really thought about this until just today. So but I'm thinking that like that's maybe how I like maybe that's why I like to make my friends by like doing a bunch of research about them first. So I
Oh.
kind of have an
So
idea,
you
although
so you don't wanna be surprised. And I really feel like you're not telling me everything you learned about me before you decided to invite me to the
that's
sleepover.
that's where I'm
I
going. Oh my gosh, I keep saying that. However, I
I
hadn't
don't
like
believe it.
but I had heard about, like I had heard about you from a few people at the conference. They're like, "Oh, did you see this oh, or they had your stickers?" I'm
Uh-huh,
like, "Oh, those are funny." And so she might be somebody that I'd be interested in talking to. So I had a little bit of intel, but I did not stalk you. I did not watch your YouTube videos before I met you.
uh-huh. I mean, it does help that you knew some people that knew me. I mean, I wasn't
Right.
just a complete
Right.
stranger, but I would
Right.
argue that most people are good.
Yeah.
We have determined a lot of people are flaky, but most people are also good people. They might back
Yeah.
out on plans, but they're innately
Yes.
good. So I did a little research before our call. I was trying to figure out how many hours does it take to actually make a friend, a real friend? How much time does it take to graduate from acquaintance to friend to very good friend? Is there a certain
Mm,
amount of time that you need? And there's a researcher, his name is Jeffrey A. Hall from the University of Kansas. And he did a study, and it's a little different for college students versus just regular adults. And I think it's because they're living in close quarters, they're interacting more, and maybe it's the youthful exuberance. Who knows? So it's a less amount of time for college students than it is for adults. But in his study, it took the students 43 hours and adults 94 hours to turn a casual acquaintance into a casual friend. But then it took 57 hours to transition from casual friends to friends, whereas adults on average needed about 164 hours of exposure to that person. Then it takes it to the next level. For college students, friends became good or best friends after about 119 hours, but adults needed an additional 100 hours on top of that
mm,
to become really good, like best friends. But when you
mhm.
think about it, when you break down the math, you're looking at 2 hours a week, and, like, within a year, you have a really good friend, provided everything, fell into place there. I mean, that's not a
Mhm.
lot of investment. It's really not. I mean, you can burn through
Yeah.
2 hours so quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
Kind of related to what we were saying before. I think it comes down to that, the follow through. I think some people are better at that follow through and follow up. Like I
Mhm.
know that like if I really want to create more of a relationship, or if I want to maintain a friendship, I need to, connect with them every so often. I need to, like, and sometimes it's just that simple, like just sending, a text message or sending an email or saying, hey, let's get on, a call, or let's go to lunch. Or
Mhm.
so I could see from that perspective. Like, I think that that I really feel like that's one of the building relationships, building friendship pieces that is easier than I think people either realize or they just really struggle with it. And
Mhm.
I've had a lot of people tell me admittedly that that's their issue. They just don't remember to make
Yeah.
that extra effort, right? To
I
make that
wonder,
connection.
so I was thinking, all these music programs and art and, sports programs, so many of them are cut in school, and yet those teach us patience, they teach us you gotta practice, you gotta work at it to accomplish something, and it's not just about becoming really good at a musical instrument, you
Mhm.
learn that you gotta put in that time. And we
Mhm.
need to learn how to do that. Another part of this
Right.
study was that the quality of the time matters and that small talk kills relationships. So if everything you talk about is just current events, sports, and even your pets, I would think pets are personal, but
Yeah.
apparently they're not. That eventually that'll unravel the relationship, that you really need to
Huh.
have the serious conversations or playful and imaginative discussions for people to feel like they're bonding with you. Like they wanna know how you think. They don't wanna talk about sports scores, although that's where a lot of people naturally
Yeah.
gravitate, is that easy current events and that kind of thing. And another thing I thought was interesting in the study is that you don't have to have these big, bold activities, that people tend to bond more when they're relaxed, doing kind of boring
Mhm.
stuff, like perhaps just watching a movie together or playing video games. So you're talking about your life, having a cup of coffee, and
Mhm.
that's going to build a better relationship than, like, "Hey, let's go mountain climbing."
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of believe that, and it's kind of funny because I feel like that's kind of sort of where I was going with the sleepover idea, and just
Mhm.
having, and just small groups of people getting together and just being able to talk.
Right. Well, I think another part of your parameters is that you don't want people leaving to go to bars and all that kind of stuff. You want them to
Mhm.
hang out
Right.
together, pretty much doing nothing, just chilling out at
Right.
this house. Like we're talking
Right.
about
Right.
things, and you have an agenda where we can talk about some professional development or what have you,
Yeah.
but for the most part, we're just hanging out, cooking,
Yeah.
not wearing makeup, that kind of
Yeah.
thing, just relaxed, and
Yeah.
yeah, you really do build better relationships that way. So I was thinking about the average person who would like to be able to have more friendships. And they're not necessarily going to be able to rent a mansion on the beach and have a sleepover, to make it
Mhm.
happen. But I encourage people to go out there and, meet folks, but they don't need to have this big, bold party and this huge investment. It is an investment of time. You're looking at maybe 2 hours a week.
Mhm.
But I would say the biggest investment would be beverages. And hear me out on this. So when I was a kid, my mom would always have Kool-Aid or lemonade. And my friends would come over and we would have some Kool-Aid or lemonade. And sometimes she'd make iced tea. And later on, when we had more money, she would buy sodas. And so we had this little refrigerator with sodas in it. And then they would want to hang out because we had these beverages. And my mom always made sure she had coffee and iced tea in case another person, like an adult, stopped by to, relax and chit chat and all that kind of thing. Like, it was part of being hospitable. And so often I will go over to someone's house and they have like oat milk and tap water because they've never even considered somebody coming over and just spending sort of uneventful, and I don't wanna call it boring. It's not boring. It's actually
Mhm.
so critical just to sit there and bond, to sit on the
Mhm.
front porch and just relax and sip iced tea. Like, they don't have beverages 'cause they never thought about it. I mean, sharing a pot of tea or a pot of coffee, that's not a huge financial investment. You don't need to go out
Yeah.
to a fancy dinner. You don't need to go, to an expensive hockey game or something like that to make friends. Just sitting around, sipping on a beverage, make sure you have something to offer. And then we're talking a few dollars there. That is not
Yeah.
a lot of money that you need to, spend to make this investment in yourself. I mean, and the other
Yeah.
thing too, I would think is food.
Mhm.
I have so many girlfriends that just have like a freezer filled with like lean cuisines, and then they'll say, I can't find a romantic partner. I'm like, yeah, well, if they open your refrigerator, you're pretty much saying this is just for me. Like you have not opened up your world for anyone else, but a big old pot of pasta or chili or soup. You're saying, I'm ready to share a meal with somebody else. And they always say the way to a man is through his stomach, but the way to anyone is pretty
Yeah.
much through their mouth. Like we're sharing a beverage, we're sharing food. I have room for you in my life. I want you to feel comfortable. I want you to be here and spend some time with me. And so if you don't like tea and you're a coffee drinker, is it that big of a deal to buy a box of tea and maybe have some honey or milk or sugar? That's not a huge investment. And now you can have someone over and you have other beverages to offer to them. I mean, you certainly, if you can afford alcohol or you like alcohol or whatever, to throw that in there too. But it just shows other people that you have opened up your home to them and
Yeah.
you want to spend that time with them.
Yeah. I think that's good, solid advice. And I don't even think that I grew up with learning. I know I didn't grow up learning that, but I think that's good, solid advice.
Beverages. It all begins with
Beverages.
beverages. Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
friendship is an investment. And so
Yeah.
we're saying 2 hours a week and a pot of tea. Can you do that? 2 hours a week and a beer or a cup of coffee. Uh,
Yeah.
in the middle of the day, right around 2:30, my blood sugar goes down. I get a little tired. And for many, many years, there was this guy named Jason who worked for me who knew this, that I would start walking around looking for chocolate. And so he would stash peppermint patties in his desk. And so sometimes I would be stuck on a conference call and he just knew. And so he'd walk in and drop a peppermint patty on my desk. But now that I'm not in corporate America, I use that time, my little chocolate and phone call, and I call somebody just to catch up with them. And here we are, so many of us are working from home and we're not having those, coffee breaks because perhaps we're not interacting with people in person, but just to have that period of time every day where I'm probably not going to be able to focus too much. I need to take a little bit of a break. Why not take that time to interact with somebody else and just bake it into your schedule?
Oh, I think that's one of the problems with like when we went to work from home, so many people forgot about doing that sort of stuff and putting that into their schedules. I regularly have on my calendar, and it's maybe not like that, like you're saying that certain time of the day, but I do consciously think before each week, like who haven't I talked to in a while? Who do I want to
Mhm,
connect with? Who do I need to reach out to? And I schedule that time on my calendar, a conversation with, so and so or
mhm.
so and so or so and so, because that is, you're right. Like that's that part of that couple of hours a week that people think is lost because we're working from home. But
No, but we have a
yeah,
phone. We can do
yeah,
this, and we can do it on
yeah.
Zoom or other video conference platforms as well. How many real friends do you think someone needs? I mean, here you are out there collecting as many as possible, but, like, how many do you
Hmm.
think you really need?
I think I think a couple. I mean, and I guess I'm only thinking that like it's a couple because what if the one just like flakes out on you? You need
Uh-huh.
another one, just as you need to at least have another one, I think. I mean,
You need to have one in reserve, is that what you're saying?
yeah, I mean, I hadn't really put a lot of thought into it. That was just my knee-jerk reaction is to say that, like, because I would normally probably say one would
Uh-huh.
be, sufficient to have one good friend, but like, I feel like you need a couple and you need some for like maybe even a little balance. I don't know. That's
You don't
a
know? Well, apparently
that's
there's
a
some science behind it. I found this researcher, Dr. Robin Dunbar, and,
Mhm.
he's an evolutionary psychologist, at Oxford University, and so he has this book out, and he has this thing called the Dunbar's number, And he said the maximum number of people that like relationships that you can keep track of in your brain is between 100 and 250.
Mhm.
But as far as that intimate person that really knows you really well, he says that's like
Mhm.
1.5 people, and that the average
Oh,
person will feel fulfilled if they have 3 to 5 close relationships. So, if there are billions of people on the planet, I mean, the math is stacked in your favor to be able to go out and find 3 to 5 people that you really love. But as you age, it's important to have more because they die off.
well,
And
that's what I was thinking too, is that
yeah,
backup. Yeah.
yeah, as a backup, like, you need some backup friends. You do, like, get in line, get in line. Yeah, I know it's kinda morbid, but it
Yeah,
is true
it's life.
as people age, it's like, where are my friends? And also, when you have children, apparently you lose 2 friends, or you lose even more than that, and then if you get, married, you tend to lose a couple of friends, that
Mhm.
way as well. So it's important to constantly refresh. So you're doing a great
Yeah.
job getting out there and bringing more people into your world. But I would say you're very rare. Most people aren't doing that. There's
Yeah.
a global loneliness epidemic. Have you heard about this?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So even before COVID, this was a problem. And the United Kingdom created the Minister for Loneliness. That's one of these government
Mhm.
positions, and that's a terrible title, by the way. I would hate walking around introducing myself as the Minister for Loneliness, but some people don't want to be called a manager.
Yeah.
Like, really, I'll try Minister for Loneliness. Sounds terrible. In Japan, they have this thing called hikikomori. Have you heard of this?
I have, but
Hikikomori?
I'm not. Yeah.
Yeah. So apparently they have over 1 million people that have completely withdrawn from society. They do not socialize at all. And this is becoming a problem, not just in Japan, but worldwide in so many other countries where people have just completely withdrawn. And yet they'll talk about how being lonely has the equivalent negative impact on your body as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, as
Mhm.
far as heart disease and mental health and all that kind of stuff. So we're more lonely than ever before, yet we have more abilities to connect with anybody. I mean, here we have all these tools in front of us. You don't have to go knock on someone's door and say, "Hey, do you have anyone here my age that I might want to hang out with?" I mean, we're not doing that, but we could find people on the internet that have shared interests.
Yeah.
And to your point, you're able to reach out to anyone,
Yeah.
and you have, and convince them to come hang out at a sleepover. But not just that, you convince them to log on to Zoom calls and chit chat with other people every other week. Like all through COVID, we were doing that what, every other week or was it every 3 weeks? I don't remember.
Something like that. I don't remember. It was a lot at first, and then yeah.
It
Yep.
tapered off a little bit, but you were scheduling those calls. They were giving up their time to get to know each other, and most of these people were strangers, and you convinced them to do it without a lot of hard selling
Oh, yeah. No,
because
it was the exact opposite. Everybody really, I could tell people wanted that connection,
mhm,
or they were looking for it. I absolutely think that this is it's a thing. It's a very big thing, loneliness. It's a very big thing that people are not connecting in the way that they used to. And as far as where I'm coming from, I keep thinking, I'm like, yeah, there's a clear path forward here for me somewhere along the line that has
yeah.
to do with connecting.
Well, it's
Yeah.
so critical, and it also trickles into, people's romantic lives. If they're having this hard of a time making friends, how are they going to build any kind of rapport where they could have a romantic relationship? Because that's even more vulnerable.
Hmm.
I mean, it's the same thing. There's a lot to making friends that's very similar to dating. I mean, you have to find them, approach them,
Totally.
build rapport with
Yeah.
them, invest a lot of time with
Mhm,
them, not scare them
mhm,
off,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
There are a lot of movies and shows that have come out recently where someone has befriended somebody who then takes advantage of them, usually financially, right? There's like
Yep.
Anna and the Tender Swindler and all that. I actually wrote a screenplay back in 2016 about this and pitched it to some producers, and then they didn't take me up on it. And then I see all these shows, and every time I see them, I'm like, my soul is crushed. But there are some, I would say, some
Yeah.
general rules, and that is, okay, if you're going to meet somebody that you've never met before, if you're going to spend any time with them, I would do this in public places until you get to know them. And then even a year into it, do not give them money. Just do not. No matter how great the story is, you just don't want to be a mark. But definitely use some common sense, make sure other people know where you are and all that, because there
Mm,
are a few scary people
right.
out there, but for the most part, they're not. Like, you should
Yeah.
trust people, but use some common sense. Can you think of
Yeah.
anything else? Like, I don't want to.
I totally agree. And actually, I was thinking that when you were talking about earlier about having, beverages, because I was going to say too that like, oh, but of course, yeah, the initial time that you meet someone in most instances, especially if you don't know them or you don't have any connection to them some other way, you should be meeting them in a public place and not
Yeah.
inviting them to your house. And
Right. Right. Right.
the
Right.
first time, I mean, that's the thing. Like I sound a little bit crazy when I said I reach out to these people, but there's always some sort of connection. Like even with you, like I knew how to track you down if
Mm-hmm.
something went sideways like that, I knew how to I knew I knew enough about you that I knew that like, okay, if this goes the wrong way, there's other people, I know where she works, I know what she does, I know where she
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Right.
Like
Right. My
that's so
reputation's at stake
different.
too.
Exactly. I know
Yeah.
that's what I was gonna say. I
Uh
was trying to
huh.
say it nicely, like
No.
I could bring you down if
Yeah. I
I
mean, you
had to,
could. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, absolutely. There's a safety piece to it. So I think it's important to bring that up because even though I sound like, I'm using my woo and like I just
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm also
Yeah.
not like just frivolously doing that. I like you said, I've heard a lot of stories from other people kind of in that security space where yeah, you have to be careful and you have to be
Mm-hmm.
careful with what you do online and what you allow access
Right. But
to
for
in your
someone that
world.
Right. So for someone that know, you've been introduced to, you feel a little safer around, like they could come over for a cup of coffee or,
Absolutely.
pot of tea or something like that. I'm not saying invite a total stranger in, but a total stranger you should meet out in public for sure. And also you have all of these electronic means to communicate with people, and why not have more video calls and get to know them that
Yep.
way as well, and play some online games and what have you. I mean, there's other ways to get to know people for sure. And you are not only a character in my story, you were a cartoon character in someone's book. And I thought maybe you want to tell everyone about that.
Yeah, sure. Sure. So it's kind of funny. And this happened because I made a friend on LinkedIn. As I do, I connected because people are like, how did you meet this author? And I'm like, oh, on LinkedIn.
So
Um,
you stalked her on LinkedIn and then
I
she said,
did
"Why don't you be in my book?" Or
I did. She's actually somebody I considered as an invitee to the sleepover, which is how I
uh-huh.
initially connected with her. And we had a conversation and then we stayed connected. And then she put out a thing one time asking a post on LinkedIn asking if people ever had, if there was something that they were ever embarrassed about or a quirk that they had as a kid, and that she was writing this book. And I don't know if she said that initially, but anyway, I responded to it and I was like, I don't know if this is really a quirk. But again, because I'm, whatever, talking to this person I don't really know that I met through social media. But I was poor growing up, and
Mhm.
my mother worked manual labor and we were poor and I was always embarrassed about that. And um, so I just kind of shared a little bit about that. And she said she was writing this book called You've Got Quirks. The book she had written several children's stories. They were about you've got values, you've got gifts, you've got personality, you've got skills, and they were all fictional. But this one she wrote as a nonfiction book called You've Got Quirks. And there's several different stories in there. And mine talks about what I learned, even though I, was one, my quirk, I thought, of being poor And my mom always taught me to work hard and to be kind. At the time, I thought this isn't really a quirk, and like, there's much more, much more important things you need to share there. But I've learned over time and through other people that I've shared the story with, which is the other reason, like I said before, I like making friends. People have stories that they feel like they need to share. Is that there are other kids out there that are feeling that way. And so my message was, no matter your home situation or your, what you think, your clothes or what your parents might do or not do, that you're awesome and that, not to like take all of that to heart. So it's a kid's book. I'm a cartoon character, kind of cool. I've got a little cartoon character of a little Ann and Big Ann. And it's a really short story amongst a bunch of stories. And yeah, it's connected me to other people too, like the other people, the other characters in the book.
Oh, that's great.
So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So once again, you reached out to a total stranger and now you're a cartoon character in their book.
exactly. We've cried on the phone briefly.
Oh, wow.
Total stranger, cried, and now I'm in her book.
Uh,
That's how it works.
that's great.
Yeah.
What are your heavy pet peeves?
Ooh, so a couple of mine are words, like things or phrases that people use. One of them that just grates on my nerves every single time, and it's one of those that I don't think everybody shares with me because I feel like they're like, really? The phrase "in other words." I can't stand it. And my mom said it all the time. So there's a part of me who, of course, adored my mom.
Uh-huh.
So I hate that, like, it's a phrase that she would say often that it annoys the crap out of me to hear people say it. To me, it sounds like, you're too dumb to understand what I said the first time. So I'm going to
Uh-huh.
put it into words that you might understand better. So I don't know.
Oh,
It
that's
just
funny.
grates
Do
on
you
my nerves.
do you have any others?
Uh, uh, the use of amazing, it bothers me a lot too. Like, I think that that's an overused
Um,
word.
it
Like, I think
is.
that, yeah, if
Yeah.
I use it, then it was really amazing if I use it. But the in other
Yeah.
words is the one that just grates. Like, I can read it in a book. Like, I don't even have to, like, read it in a book. I hear somebody say it. Like, it automatically, like, if I'm reading a book, I automatically, like, oh my God, I'm judging you now. Like, I might have liked your book, but now you just said in other words, and everything is all out the window.
I don't like, the phrase cottage industry.
Cottage industry?
Cottage industry drives me nuts. Anytime I hear someone say, "Oh, it's just a cottage industry, blah, blah, blah," I just feel like they're trying to be pseudo intellectuals and
Uh,
I can't stand it. I'm like, "Do not. I don't want anything from a cottage industry, and I don't like the person who describes it as a
yeah,
cottage industry." Just the whole ugh,
fair,
gross. Can't handle it.
fair, fair.
I'm out.
Yep. Yeah.
And the next question, what were you afraid of as a child and what are you afraid of now?
So so I was saying earlier, that I was pretty adventurous as a kid, and when I look back on it, I'm like, "Man, I was not afraid of a lot of things." Like, I was just willing to go out there and try and do all the things. But I was very afraid of at the mall when Santa Claus was at the mall,
Uh-huh.
just in that time in particular. I think that was the only time I was worried about it, but I was afraid that when I went down the escalator, like, specifically by where they set up the North Pole, that I was gonna be sucked under the escalator and going to the North Pole, and I thought that's how they got there. Don't ask me
Was from
why,
the
I don't know.
escalator? You thought the North Pole showed up at the
Some
mall through the escalator.
somehow somehow in my brain, I thought, "Gotta jump off of that, otherwise I'm going to the North Pole." Like,
I love that. I love it. Okay, let's do these other questions. So the questions I'm going to ask you come from the very interesting game or the very interesting game show because I write other questions throughout the week and I just put them on like a PowerPoint when I'm doing these online game shows. So remember the rules. No politics, no religion, no ad nauseum topic du jour in your answers. And I'm looking for ridiculous and interesting. I don't want an accurate answer. So don't Google the answer. The most ridiculous, interesting, and creative answers are what I'm looking for. Now, this next question came from the Halloween expansion pack that I made last year. The hair on honeybees' eyeballs helps them to detect humidity, determine how the wind is blowing, and pick up extra pollen. Pick a weird place to grow hair on your body and give it a fascinating function besides just being hair.
Okay, so
And
I'm
do
gonna.
you,
Oh, go ahead.
well, I was wondering if you wanted some examples to get the
No,
no?
because
Okay.
I automatically thought of like two things like that. One of them I automatically thought of because I'm left-handed. It might be nice to have like some hair on the side of my finger to kind of like brush things out of the way. That's not really a great one when I'm writing because it's like you have that weird thing where like your hand gets
It gets
in a
dirty.
weird spot when you're
Yeah, it gets
writing.
ink on it and stuff.
Yeah,
I
so
I
like
think
there
a
was a
lot of
brush.
lefties.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out like I can't figure out how that would work. But the other
Uh-huh.
thing that I thought of immediately was some hair between my toes, like the hair to like just give them some space so that they could be just naturally spaced out. So when I'm painting my toenails, they don't like touch each other.
So this hair only shows up when you're having a pedicure?
Yeah, because we needed to go away after that because that wouldn't be cute,
Mhm.
right? But it has to
Yeah.
stay, yeah, they it just kind of comes out when you're getting the pedicure and then after the pedicure it kind of, and it dries, of course, the
Uh-huh.
toenails dry.
So hairy
It would
toe
be convenient.
separators.
Yeah.
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 Mhm. I love
Logical.
that. Next question. The Benedictine monk, Dom Perignon, you got to say it like that. Dom Perignon spent a lot of time trying to remove bubbles from champagne. What did he have against bubbles?
Oh, well, he just he had a girlfriend named Bubbles.
Very common name back then.
Yeah, and that yeah, I don't know. That's a really
Was
that
she a
was a really
dancer,
awful.
Anne?
I think she was a dancer.
And so it was a bad breakup, and the bubbles reminded
Yeah.
him of
Yeah,
her.
reminded him of her and every time he saw the bubbles. Although, yeah, he just
That's what's
couldn't do
going
it.
on.
He just couldn't do it.
Bad breakup. And the next question, herring communicate with each other by farting. What message do you wish you could deliver with a fart?
To stay away from me. Um, However, I mean, I automatically thought of the times that like I'm in my office and that happens, and then someone comes really close in my space, and I can't help but thinking, well, that's what you get for coming in my space when you weren't invited. Now, like now you have to deal with it. Now you have to deal with the smell because you came in my space. So
You let one rip and then someone walks in without asking and they just stand in your cloud of stench. You're like, well, there you
exactly.
go.
Whoop,
You
there you
shouldn't
go.
have gotten this close to me.
Exactly.
You can't even pretend it's something else because you're sitting at your desk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yep,
Yeah. All
that's it.
right. Okay, the last question of the day. What should have been invented by now?
I think what should have been invented by now, and it's not terribly clever, but I do think that a very consistent way of taking your temperature with your cell phone
Hmm.
should have been invented by now. I feel like that's something that could have been, and I feel like there's some maybe attempts at that sort of thing, but I think that that should have been invented by now. A good
Yeah, you
solid
should just
way
be
to
able to
take your
put
temperature.
your yeah, you should be able to
Yeah,
put your phone to your forehead and you know what your temperature is.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. All right, Anne, I really appreciate you spending this time with us and showing us how to break past those barriers to make new friends. It's so critical. I mean, if you want to live a more interesting life, you need to attract people to you, right? I mean, people give you proposals, promotions, propositions, and real friendships are critical for good health, like we talked about before. So, for anyone out there listening, go out there and make some new friends and don't be afraid of rejection. I mean, if Anne can do it, I can do it, you can do it. And remember to stock up on some beverages.
Absolutely.
Maybe not French 75s.
I don't know, you made some friends.